Welcome to Goldfish on Games, where today we're checking out a strangely familiar light gun, but it is unique because it's the C64 Trojan Phaser. The Trojan Phaser was a bundle released by Trojan around 1994 based on the copyright dates, though finding an exact date is proving to be quite hard. If the style of the box looks quite familiar, then your eyes are not tricking you, as it's based on the Magnum light gun that we've seen previously. Checking the label, we see that it includes 6 action games and the Lightphaser, which was the name of the other gun. If you've not seen that video, I'll include a link. Now, Trojan themselves produced and published a number of light gun games, so it made sense that they would want to make their own bundle. The back of the box goes into the design of the light gun itself and doesn't show off any of the games. So this must have been so they could use the same box for multiple bundles and not need to update it. And it just asks us to refer to the sticker that we found on the front about the games. If we look inside, we can find the gun, as well as a single cassette that has all 6 games on it. Now if we actually look around, we can find some copyright notices for Virgin Mastertronic, which was the company that produced the other bundle. And it's crazy to think they got 6 games on just 2 sides of this cassette. Unfortunately, I didn't get a manual in the box, but thankfully it is pretty simple to work out. Let's take a quick look at the hardware itself, and it's still that single button gun that we've seen before. That was influenced, but is not a direct copy of the Sega Master System Lightphaser. Now compared to the Spectrum, this actually has a standard 9-pin connector, but I will say the construction feels a little bit cheaper than before, as it does flex when squeezed and the trigger feels far more mushy. Now typically the Trojan guns released for the other systems would be white, with a Phaser logo, where what I've got here has the Magnum branding on it and it's black. From what little information I could actually find out about this bundle, this might have been common, and it's possible they were just using some old stock up, but at this point it's hard to tell as there's very little information about this online. Thankfully this bundle actually has 5 games we've not seen before, and one that actually has cropped up a few times, so let's check them out, shall we? First up we have Gunslinger, which is a target shooting game played across 3 different scenes. The first scene is that classic, which has wooden targets turning that you have to hit. Now the goal for each of these scenes is actually to hit 50 targets with a set amount of ammo. Complete that successfully and you'll end up on the second scene, which has much smaller targets that pop up at the end of a range. And it turns out when you complete all 3 scenes, the level increases and the number of bullets you get decreases by 10, so the further you get, the better shot you need to be. And that third scene that you need to complete is something out of a western, where you have to shoot at targets as they pop up in windows in the saloon. And as we can see, the game looks quite nice. It has some nice animation touches with some jaunty music keeping it all going. But it is a bit of a shame there's no sound effects, and when you finish level 10, the game just loops back round to level 1, so you end up having the full 200 bullets again. So I'm guessing they didn't really expect you to be able to get all the way to the end. It's also a 2-player game, with each player having to share the gun. Luckily, there are no time limits, it's purely down to your ability to hit the targets, so you don't have to worry too much about the other player hogging the gun when it's your turn. Goosebusters is a clay pigeon shooting game like none you've seen before. It starts off simple enough, with you having unlimited ammo to shoot a sequence of targets. If you hit enough, you'll win the round and you get to continue. But as you go, the path the clays take starts to get more varied and interesting. And just as you think you've got the make of the game, bombs start to show up. Hit these and you'll actually lose points, so you have to be very careful with your aim. And it won't be too long before balloons start to make an appearance. And boy will these things move fast. They'll absolutely flood the screen with them. This might be the most targets I've ever seen in a light gun game. And just to add to the mix, there'll also be these static targets that will pop up in the later levels, which makes all the targets that you're meant to hit. Unfortunately, there is one more obstacle that will make your life difficult: a flock of radio-controlled birds. Hitting them will also mean you'll lose a point, so you really have to take very careful aim. Again, this is a very colourful game with a nice background, but it's a shame there weren't any others. The next title is Baby Blues, one of the more original games in the collection. Yes, it's still mostly shooting targets, but the reason you're doing it is because you're babysitting some random person's baby. Now that baby will get upset if his milk gets too low, which will happen if the rare milk drinking eagle will swoop down and steal it, or if the spider will sit down next to him and drink it. The eagle will just take a hit and vanish, but the spider, he'll just head back up into the tree and then try and scurry back down again later. Now you can actually refill the milk if you hit that small train that travels past. The main aim of the game is to shoot the balloons that float past. Hit enough of them with the allotted ammo and you can go on to the next level, which is mostly the same, just with more things on screen at once. And occasionally you'll get this nice little worm that will crawl across. Unfortunately, unlike the previous two games, gun accuracy in this game is bad. Like really, really bad. Even doing the calibration did nothing to help. The problem is that there seems to be very little consistency to where the shots land, so you can't really correct yourself for it after a few shots. The general spread is just way too wide. And I've even seen it getting stuck hitting the same point even if I've moved the gun. It also doesn't help that hit detection is absolute garbage, all of which makes for what should have been a fun little game and makes it just a chore to play. Which is a real shame, as it looks nice enough and has some nice SID music. We move on now to the streets of Ghost Town, a place that's just overrun with these purple ghosts. Now they might just look like regular people, but we're very much told that they are ghosts, so it's absolutely fine to shoot them. Which is what you'll have to do as you slowly walk down the street. Now this is the first game we've seen that's had scrolling, so that's quite nice. But as with the previous game, the hit detection seems a little bit off. I've seen the hit effect over the target and it's not taking them down, so it can be a little tricky to actually get the shots in. The way you fail the long walk is by running out of ammo, so you need to make sure every shot counts. But any target that you fail to take down will result in you losing 5 bullets, so you can't just sit there and do nothing. Now, as is typical with these type of games, there's also a friendly that you have to avoid hitting. Now there is just this single street for you to walk down, and the baddies will show up in the exact same place each time you play. The only difference is that when the level changes, is the number of bullets you have goes down, which is exactly the same as we've seen in the previous games. Now I think we can start to see how they managed to fit 6 games on just a single cassette, as while they do have some nice looking art, catchy music and a touch of decent animation, they are very limited in the number of level variations each of them have. Now before we get on to the next game, I have to give a flashing screen warning, as this game not only flashes the screen white, but also other colours, and it gets quite bad in places. So if you want to avoid it, please skip forward to the next game. The last of the original games we get to check out is Cosmic Storm, which is effectively a shoot 'em up, as waves of baddies will fly onto the screen and you have to take them down. Any that manage to finish their path and get off the screen again will increase the damage that your pod will take. Your ammo is limited, but you can increase it if you manage to shoot the flying golden letters. Now as this is a space setting, the screen is mostly black with this cool star effect, but because the light gun can't track when the ray beam is off, it has to flash the whole screen white to give it something to spot. Now this gets quite bad where you have to take down lots of enemies at once, and sometimes it'll just randomly flash the screen other colours as well, which isn't that great. When you finish a level, you get a bonus round, in which you have to shoot hidden targets. I've never managed to hit all 4, so I can only guess it will give you more points, as points are the goal of this game, as you get them for taking out baddies and for how accurate you were with your shots. The difficulty ramps up very quickly, with waves of weird and wonderful enemies just flying across the screen. So death will come for you at some point, as will crashes, as I had this one crash twice on me while recording. And the final game is Operation Wolf, a light gun classic that we've already seen on multiple systems, and this time is for the C64. Now Operation Wolf, if you've not seen it before, is an arcade shooter where you have to make it to the end of the level without dying, which means you have to take out multiple enemies and vehicles with your trusty gun and rocket launcher. You fire bullets using the light gun, but rockets have to be triggered using the keyboard, which means reaching over to it and hitting the left bracket key, which means 90% of the time your aim will be messed up and you won't hit what you mean to. This version, as we've come to expect from the C64, has smooth scrolling, and even some quite large objects being shown on screen, with both the helicopters being nice and big, as well as the enemies that show up closer to the player. This seems like a decent take on the game, with lots of pickups and friendlies to avoid, though it does seem to be missing the animals that you can hit in some versions that would give you extra ammo or health, so it's very similar to the Spectrum version. But I did like the fact that you could shoot out the windows. That's always a nice touch. It's easily the biggest and best game in the bundle. Now the other games were a little basic in what they did gameplay wise, but they were nice to look at and had some decent music. So it's not the worst collection of games we've ever seen. And as far as I can tell, there were 8 other games that were released that had support for this light gun, which included the follow-up to Operation Wolf, Operation Thunderbolt. So we might have to check that out at some point. I have to say, even though we've seen this hardware before, it was quite interesting to check it out on another platform, because we got to see a bunch of unique and interesting titles for it, and I get the feeling this isn't the last time we're going to see this particular design. So until next time, I was the Goldfish, that was the light gun that just kept on going, and this was Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching my video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, you can let me know down in the comments, or you can use those buttons just below. You know the ones I mean. Or if you're not sure yet, then you can check out 2 other videos that I've done that are on the screen right now. So thank you again, and I hope to see you soon.